What we're here for?
Sports psychology interview about your mental preparation for Giants Live. I'm obviously a sports psychologist, and when athletes are coming up to an event, we're always looking at like the preparation for that event and how they psychologically prepare, because we're doing loads of physical training, but we also look at the mental aspect as well. So, what percent of strongman would you say is psychological?
In terms of the comp day, probably quite a high percent. Obviously you have to get yourself to a standard, but it's been able to deliver that standard on a competition day. It's just roll the dice, everyone's different, but I always say that best mental state comes from when you've been best prepared. So I think your mental state will be worse if you're not as prepared, or if training's not been going well, or if you're carrying niggles or injuries. They're the things that will eat away at your mental state.
So if you feel like you're totally prepared, all stones unturned, you've done everything you can to be in that best physical and psychological state on the day.
Yeah, so for me, we were talking about it earlier, so for me the way I try and look at my competitions now, so I've got 5 events and I just give myself personal goals on each of the 5 events. Obviously I'll push harder or chase people if they've set a time or an amount of weight or reps or whatever, but give myself my targets, and then at least if I can complete them targets, and they've got to be realistic. I can't just suddenly chuck 50 kilos on something. They've got to be realistic targets. And I think if I can achieve them targets, then I'll walk away with my head held high and I'll be happy. And that is probably a good mental state, because you don't want to come away from a competition being negative. I do it because I enjoy it. No one's forcing me to compete. It's part of what I want to do. So, I've got to enjoy myself. And you've got to enjoy the comp, you've got to enjoy the experience, and you want to go away and you want to do another one.
Yeah.
So for me, in the past 2 comps I did, I had the Britain's Strongest Man, the Europe's Strongest Man back in the last year, and I was carrying injuries then. But I did the same thing. I gave myself targets on the events. I was like, they're my targets, they're my goals. And it's just easier really to come away with my head held higher, knowing that I'd at least matched them. So if I get beaten or if people do better, they're just better. And I can never control what other people do. So I just try and sort of work it like that. Basically I've got 5 tick boxes for 5 events.
Yeah.
I want to pull that, I want to do this time on that, I want to do that many reps on that. And that's usually the best way, I think, for strongmen.
See what you said then about controlling stuff. Almost every athlete I work with is worrying about things they've got no control over.
Of course.
And I always bring it back to controlling the controllable things.
So what I used to do, and I'm sure the other lads do it, and I'm sure a lot of strongmen do it, they'll spend a lot of time watching everybody else, all their training, seeing what everyone else is doing. And you're going to do that forever. It's a natural thing to do. You want to know what your competitors are doing, but essentially, realistically, the best thing to do would be not watch anybody, because you can't control what they're doing. If they're doing really good, does that mean that that's going to put you on a downer? Or if they're struggling, does that suddenly lift you? But it's an almost false sense of security, because someone could pretend they're struggling. I think a lot of people watch other people too much, and then they let that eat away in their own training. Because if someone's doing really well, they're like, right, I need to be there. And that little bit there is where the problems can come. That's where someone can get hurt, injured, overtrained. Obviously, we all have our own abilities. Some of us are better at some things than others.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the case in strongman. You're probably a naturally better tennis player than me. or I might be naturally good at tennis.
You're definitely better at yoga
you
than
know.
me.
So like it's like you say, don't control. Don't worry about things you can't control. But that's so much easier said than done.
Yeah, that's a skill in itself.
Yeah, and I think that goes for any sport.
What are you focusing on? What are you paying attention to?
So this week building up, I'm just trying to focus on making sure I eat enough food. And by saying that, I don't mean I'm going to go out and eat more than I normally would, which I know some people probably would. I want to eat enough that I feel like I'm getting enough, but don't eat too much, because I'll end up coming in heavier. And there's no point coming in heavier for me on the show than I've been in training, because it can affect certain things. I want to be the same, making sure my hydration's good, and obviously sleep best I can.
Because you say that, because athletes this week, so I've got one athlete who's in the Commonwealth, and two things we look at is hydration and sleep.
Yeah.
Big performance enhancers.
Yeah, I mean hydration is something that people aren't educated properly on, and I mean you even laughed about it at dinner. My wife's putting salt on her food, and she's putting a lot of salt on her food, and that's always been frowned upon. But as an athlete and as a sports person, that's a must. For every litre of water, you need to take X amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and people still aren't educated on that. Like my water, so I've got 2 litres of water, and then I put 5 electrolyte tablets in, which have got sodium, magnesium, potassium in, and I always drink that in my water, because your muscles need water, but they need the electrolytes. You can't just give it water, it needs both. And that goes for all things, like if I go for a day and I don't have any of this, my muscles will start cramping.
That's why we look at the brain and sleep, because when you sleep, if you have good quality sleep, deep sleep you're releasing growth hormones, but it's like putting your brain through a washing machine. All those neurotransmitters, neurons are getting washed. And your brain's running like 11 systems, so it needs to be optimally ready. Do you know what I mean? And if you're tired and you're not drinking enough fluid,
even when you sleep, your brain releases stuff that helps inflammation, and there's all sorts of wacky, amazing things that happen when you sleep. So
your brain's the governor; it's running everything.
So I know if I'm not sleeping well, because it'll affect the rest of my day. Like napping's something I've done for 20 years, and I still feel like even if I didn't need it, my body craves it.
Napping's good.
Like it gets to the time around between 12 and 2, and I'm just wanting one. Even if I don't need it, my brain's ready to have 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And I think as a strength athlete, that's quite important.
Afternoon naps are good for you. Good to get a nap in.
So all the people out there sleeping on your lunch hour, I credit you.
So Giants Live Saturday, 6th of August.
Yep.
I've seen you training, looking good. Looking in good shape.
It's been really good. I mean, I couldn't have hoped for a better prep, because when I started this whole prep, I was still injured. I set goals. I was like, this is where I want to be. And at the time they were very unrealistic, but it's just each week, one step at a time, one brick at a time, and I'm in pretty good shape.
There's a famous Chinese proverb. It's something about if you're going to chop down a tree, you spend 80% of your time sharpening the axe, 20% is cutting it down. So the preparation is like the main bit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that can really contribute to the rehab stuff that I was doing, and not rushing the weight increases. I think that's kind of the biggest issue I always have, is when I'm in shape or on form, that's where my strength is. So when I'm injured and my strength's down here, all I see is this huge gap. I just see, well, that's where I'm stood, and I'm looking up to where I need to be, or where I could be, or where I should be, or where I have been. And taking these little jumps, it's very hard mentally to stay regimented to them and to stay strict with that. You know, a lot of us, to our own fault, will chuck more weight on, and then as we're getting to there, you run into another problem because you've rushed the rehab, and you come back down. And I think that was half my battle, because it's been 12 months of this groin injury, and I just kept getting my name down for a comp, and I would rush, and I'd set myself back. So I pulled out of all the shows, and I focused on myself, my rehab, took my time. And I'm not 100%, you know, it's still not quite right, but, you know, my lifting speaks for itself.
But you can't rush that process.
No, you know, I mean, it's like breaking your leg and expecting to be able to run the week it's after you out your cast. It's like, no, make sure you can walk first.
Yeah.
You know, everything needs a slow return. You can't just jump straight back in. You know, like get new brakes on a car, they need wearing in, don't they? You know, all kind of things. You know, it's the same principle. Patience always overcomes
Patience.
Impatience. So, but it's something I dictate to a lot of my clients.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure every client I've had will have heard me say patience is one of the attributes I want you to have, because without it, there's no longevity in any sport.
So, enjoy yoga today?
I'm pretty sure there's a lot you could teach me, but
I think you should rename that as laughter therapy.
but
Which is a real thing.
You know, like I'll come and have a proper go at it, but it's 3 days out from comp. I'm not going to put my body in any positions that it shouldn't be going in just now. So, but yeah, it was a bit of fun.
That's right.
And we had a damn good laugh about it.
I thought he made a noise with his mouth. And that tickled me when I found out he wasn't. So yeah, that's good.
Any more questions?
No, good luck for Saturday.
Thank you. Oh.
Watching it in Miami. Live.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah.
Hope you learned something.